is Christine Niles. Okay, we're going to watch Christine Niles. It's about Sacramental. Angel, you're wearing your miraculous pendant. That's a very nice miraculous pendant. Very powerful for exorcism. Angel? Okay? Okay. We're going to watch Christine Niles and her guests. Okay? Remember, you have your own miraculous pendant. Okay.
It's important to get these crucial messages out there, but I'm fighting YouTube's algorithm. Help me to beat it by subscribing to my YouTube channel. And if you want to sign up for our email list, simply go to stellamars.media and sign up. If you're able to help us in any way, please click on Support Our Work. Thank you so much. Now, on to the show. Hello and welcome to Forward Boldly. I'm your host, Christine Niles. Protestants often accuse Catholics of being superstitious because we believe in things like holy water and blessed salt and medals, and we wear things like scapulars around our necks, sometimes with medals like this St. Benedict medal. And Protestants, like I said, accuse us of using them as magical talismans, as sort of lucky charms. And that's our reputation, is the superstitious religion. Protestants are very well known for using that trope against Catholics, especially during the Reformation, as people were persecuting Catholics under King Henry VIII and Queen Elizabeth, but also in various other parts of the country as well. But are sacramentals magical charms? Are they talismans? Are they superstition? Or are they portals of grace from an all-good, loving God? Gifts given to us to help us along the way. I was a very anti-Catholic Protestant for about 11 years, and I believed all the myths about the Catholic faith, including this myth that Catholics are just a bunch of superstitious individuals who believe in things that are not in the Bible. Of course, I have since learned that that's not true at all, that our entire faith is based on Scripture, as well as tradition. Not man-made tradition, but God-made tradition. Sacramentals are one of the most wonderful aspects of the Catholic faith. This world is full of sacred mystery. There is an interweaving of the supernatural with the natural that we simply do not understand. God interacts with us in mysterious and often invisible ways, but it's still nonetheless real, just as real as anything that we experience here. And sacramentals are a sign of that. God's grace working in the world in special ways. Just like there are sacred spots on the earth, spots that we as Catholics believe and know to be more sacred than others. For instance, the Catholic Church is sacred ground. Why is it sacred ground? Because it houses the body, blood, soul, and divinity of our Lord Jesus Christ in the sacred host, in that little tabernacle. That is sacred ground, and we treat that in a special way. We treat the high altar on which our Lord's body is confected in a special way because it's sacred. We don't treat it like a normal dinner table in the kitchen. It's a sacred object. There are sacred spots on the earth that God Himself has blessed and made very special and very holy. When we kneel, for instance, if you make a trip to the Holy Land and you kneel in all the spots where our Lord prayed, either in the Garden of Gethsemane or anywhere else, we treat those spots as holy and sacred and special. Well, sacramentals are also sacred. They're also special, whether it's blessed salt or holy water or medals, rosaries, whatever it may be. These are items that are special. They're imbued with the sacred, and they can impart grace, not in and of themselves, but because of the priest's blessing and God working through them. It's an amazing thing. They're remarkable, and they have true efficacy. St. Teresa of Avila said that her use of holy water did more to scatter the demons than any other sacramental that she used. Holy water. I always have a bottle of holy water near my bed at night, as do my children. It's very useful and very effective, especially if you have nightmares or suffer from spiritual attacks or anything like that. Also, blessed salt, known to be extremely powerful. St. Benedict medal, which I wear on my scapular, also known to be an extremely powerful sacramental. The miraculous medal, it's called miraculous for a reason. Mother Teresa believed so powerfully in the efficacy and the power of the miraculous medal, she handed it out personally to almost everybody that she met. In fact, I've heard that throughout her entire lifetime, she personally handed out something like 30,000 to 40,000 miraculous medals. Simply having them in the vicinity of an individual, maybe in their room, or something like that, has helped to lead to people's conversions. Not superstition, not myth. These are real stories which you can easily find online. Coming up, my guest, Sean McAfee, to talk about his wonderful new book, Compendium of Sacramentals. And you, perhaps a lifelong Catholic, perhaps a brand new Catholic, perhaps not a Catholic at all, you're definitely going to learn a thing or two about sacramentals. Have you signed up for our email list? Simply go to stellamars.media to sign up for the latest news, updates, and videos. And if you'd like to help us continue doing this, please click on Support Our Work and give any amount you're comfortable with. Thank you so much for your prayers and support. Now, back to the show. Sean McAfee is a convert to the Catholic faith and a lay Dominican. He's founder and editor of epicpew.com. He's written for numerous Catholic publications and resources, and he's author of this latest book called Compendium of Sacramentals, which I'm holding up right here. It's from 10 Books, and it's a beautiful, elegantly designed book, hardcover, beautiful images, pictures inside. Let me just show you guys what it looks like in here, which is wonderful because it actually is good for children. Even though it's written for adults, my children actually like to look at it because of the beautiful pictures. So, Sean, it's great to have you on the show. Welcome.
Thank you. Great to be here. Thank you.
And congratulations on your book. Thank you for writing it. I think this book is good for both non-Catholics who don't know anything about sacramentals, but also for lifelong Catholics to learn more about what sacramentals are, the history of them. There were things that I learned when I was looking through it. Like, for instance, I didn't realize that vestments are considered sacramentals. So that was very interesting. But let's jump right into it. How do we define sacramentals?
Right, so these are sacred signs instituted by the church that actually through the church's intercession have any effect. So what the church really wants us to know is that sacramentals are objects of devotion or blessings, and actually exorcisms too, which we can talk about, that through the church's intercession should dispose us to receive the grace that comes through the sacrament. So it's important to know that sacramentals don't actually confer grace. They should dispose us and move us. So what are we saying? What we're saying, we're talking about things like holy water that might not have a direct effect, but should move us, calls to remember our baptism, or, the sign of the cross, which calls to remember our faith in various ways. That's what a sacramental is.
Okay, let's respond to our Protestant critics here. Is there a biblical basis for sacramentals?
Yeah, absolutely, especially in the Old Testament. That's where I would like to draw people from first. This isn't just a New Testament thing where Jesus says, hey, go out and bless and exercise. And we'll get to a couple of objects there that he points to. But even in the Old Testament, of course, baptism and holy water, for example, are heavily prefigured. Not just in, the very first verse says God is present over the waters. And of course, the Israelites, conquered the Canaanites by crossing over the Jordan so many times was God's instructions, and that was to renew them and clean them and prepare them. Prophets like Elisha would go to Naaman and he would say, hey, to bless yourself and to cleanse your wounds and to heal you, I want you to cross through the Jordan 7 times, going through it that way. There are also salt blessings. There's even in the book of Chronicles there, and I point this out in the book, it's so cool. I didn't know this either, but there is an Old Testament recipe for holy water where the priests would sweep the dust from the temple and put it into the water to bless the people with. So that there's lots of prefigurements of sacramentals right there. And again, it's pointing to the sacraments. So that would, of course, be pointing to the sacrament of baptism, and there's several other examples for the other sacraments of the church. But when we get into the New Testament, or actually, let's rewind for a second. We talked about exorcisms, which is that excites all of us, doesn't it? Exorcisms, driving out demons, and just crazy stuff right there. So exorcisms we actually don't really see in the Old Testament because Christ held that power, and it wasn't until the New Testament that he had conferred that power onto the apostles and his disciples, the 72, to go out and cast demons out of us, pigs and people and places and things. But there is actually a prefigurement to this in the book of Tobias, or Tobit, where the angel Raphael is talking to Tobias, and in order to cure the wounds of the individual, he blesses him with ashes of a dead fish, and it actually heals him that way, and it's considered an exorcism because it drove out the demon. That's really astonishing to me. I kind of overlook those little patterns in the Old Testament that, again, prefigure the sacraments that we would find in the New. In the New Testament, of course, we find blessings. That's the very first category, and that's the most agreeable of all of the sacramentals. We find blessings all over the Bible, but especially in the New Testament. We find exorcisms, just talked about that. And then physical sacramentals. Jesus, using the physical world in order to accomplish sanctity, in order to bless and heal, right? So Jesus touching individuals. Jesus, using his spit to mix with the dirt of the earth to heal the blind man. We know that the people in I think it was Acts chapter 15, they would pass by the shadow of St. Paul and they would be healed. They would touch the robe of St. Peter and be healed. These are all, of course, physical sacramentals. They themselves don't provide the sanctifying grace, but it does show us that Christ meant for us to have certain objects of devotion, like physical objects, in order to dispose us to sanctity. Okay, so yeah, absolutely, it's totally biblical, but really, I think it's important to know that we don't just have to rely on the Bible to say, hey, this is valid. The Church's intercession is what creates a valid sacramental. So we can't just add another 5 mysteries to the Rosary, for example. We have the 4 that the Church has approved now. Anything else would be considered unapproved and not interceded by the approval of the Church for any effect that they gain. And again, they're there to bring us to a disposition in our hearts to receive, again, that sanctity that comes through receiving sanctifying grace in the sacraments. How's that sound?
Sounds great. Thank you for explaining all that. Can you talk a little bit about how we got sacramentals in the first place?
Oh man, how did we get sacramentals? So they developed, really, some of them developed grassroots, others came through visions and instructions from the Blessed Virgin Mary, or just individuals who, I'd say, came up with a certain pattern of prayer, a pattern of devotion. One of my favorite is the Stations of the Cross. So Christ said, pick up your cross and follow me. And early Christians took that literally. They took the persecution that came with that literally. And then whenever Christianity was more or less kind of tolerated, or at least legal, at the best legal, but at the very worst tolerated, people weren't getting that, pick up your cross and follow me sense in the way of persecution anymore. It was more, they took it as more of a, hey, I'm asking you to sojourn in my footsteps through the places that I was crucified. That's the way that the early people, or the early church, all the way through the medieval period, took it. So they would actually venture through the continents, however long they had to travel. We have the Via Francigena from Canterbury, or we have we have different ways of getting to Rome that are still marked out on maps today. People would pilgrimage to I said Rome, didn't I? To Jerusalem. They would go to Rome, but they would go to Jerusalem and they would follow the Via Dolorosa, which is the actual stations of the cross. Well, this became impossible for people to do because of politics or, war. Of course, the Holy Land was taken over by Muslims, around 700, around the First Crusade, before the First Crusade, and really up to now, kind of still there. So Christians were unable to do this, where they said, well, we really want to have some sort of devotion in order to continue that act of piety. It brought a lot of consolation, a lot of disposition, like we said, to be sanctified to these people. So we actually see in Europe, in parts of the Middle East, cities constructing these stations throughout their city for people to walk in times of like Lent, or even throughout the entire year. They're called mini Jerusalems. I don't remember what the Italian word for it is, but there's 7 sacred mountains in northern Italy, for example, and all of them are kind of like set up like the Via Dolorosa in Jerusalem, almost replicas. And we find this throughout Europe. And so as people wanted to do that in order to follow the stations of the cross, well, it wasn't always cost effective for a city to build that. We started putting them in our churches. So, around the 14th century, we see churches starting to have 14 little crosses, or at the very best, actual images like paintings, renderings like we would find in churches today of those stations. Jesus being condemned by Pilate all the way to his death. And we even find the 15th station sometimes in a lot of churches growing in popularity, the resurrection, of course. So kind of like I said, I could talk ad nauseum about everything from salt to medals and the rosary, but I would say that they grew through items of devotion all the way to practical ways for us to receive the benefit of what we're really imitating through Christ and the church's intercession. How's that?
Beautiful, beautiful. Let's go on to talk about the proper care and disposal of sacraments, because I know, so for instance, on Palm Sunday when we receive the Blessed Palms, I will notice sometimes that you've got kids or teenagers maybe sort of picking apart the palms while they're sitting in their seat and then just scattering them all over the floor. And at the end of Mass, I always try to make a point of picking them up because they're sacramentals, right? I mean, how should we be treating sacramentals?
The church asks us to treat them with respect through this word, dignity. So they say according to the dignity that it's been given. Of course, some sacramentals haven't exactly been blessed, but that doesn't make them not a sacramental. Like, for example, you could go buy a medal. You could go buy a St. Christopher medal or a St. Benedict medal or a miraculous medal, and it might not be blessed, but it's still a sacramental. Now, you want to take a special care of that. The dignity heightens if it's been blessed, which of course is, furtherance of the church's ministry of intercession over that object in order to bless us. So the church actually asks us, to treat them, of course, well. This includes the sign of the cross, make it well. This actually includes genuflecting and bowing. Kind of like you want to see a soldier make a nice, crisp salute. You want to see a Christian, Catholic, make a nice sign of the cross. Heartfelt. Now, of course, it's always the inner disposition that matters, but I'm talking about those, the quick ones during Mass that you look like you're at Yankee Stadium, you just hit a home run or something. We want to treat it with a level of respect. Of course, there's the physical sacramentals too. I have kids too. I have 6 kids, and I don't even know how many rosaries they've broken at this point. We started kind of stop buying rosaries, and they'll get them once a year at Christmas, and they'll be like those super strong ones that are like made of the parachute cord, just so they can stop breaking them. But for the ones that are tattered and torn, or maybe even a scapular, or maybe even blessed medals, they kind of rub over time. Either they become less, brilliant and they sparkle, or sometimes you can actually rub the face off of them, especially if they're made of like a cheaper pewter. These fall into what we call like disrepair. So if you can't repair it and maybe even have it re-blessed, that's an idea. The church asks us to dispose them in 2 ways, and they're not limited to these, but they recommend either burning them, melting them down, burning them down, ashes to ashes, kind of dust to dust idea, or to bury them in the ground, just like we would with the dignity of human bones. So yeah, the church asks us to take special care of sacramentals, even the exorcism and blessing. We should be receiving those with a solemn attitude, not kind of goofing around when we're getting that blessing from the priest, at those times.
Right. So no throwing them in the garbage. Right?
Yeah, exactly. I always tell people, they don't belong in the landfill. They belong, in the earth with, some sense of dignity.
Yeah. Now let's talk a little bit about people who accuse Catholics of being superstitious in the way that we use them. I know that there are some people who, for instance, will bury St. Joseph upside down in their front yard to sell their home. Then there are others who think that the promise of the scapular, as long as, it says if you die wearing this, then you will escape the fires of hell. But then there are those who think, oh, well, I can just lead a life of mortal sin, just put that on, I'm safe.
Right. We cover this heavily in the book. Just about every sacramental, there's a way to kind of, let's say, abuse it, especially with the rosary. The one that I didn't hear you mention that I see all the time is hanging a rosary from your rearview mirror. There is absolutely nothing wrong, or even wearing a rosary. Some people will get really, and for the right intentions, they'll get kind of upset for somebody wearing it. Now, okay, there's a difference between having your rosary on your rearview mirror or having it on your wall in your home or even wearing it around your neck as a method of your own personal piety. But there's a big difference in wearing it for, let's say, fashion. We're saying, hey, that, you know, like you mentioned, the Saint Joseph statue. I'll mention that in just a second. You know, expecting some sort of extra success with something, with an event, just because you had it, or you know, a method of safety and preservation. You know, running stoplights. Hey, I've got my rosary. You know, that's not going to prevent you from getting into accident. It's not going to lower your car insurance. So, I mean, it really doesn't make sense to be superstitious with it. Now, they do have, you know, some sort of specific effect. Now, it's not a direct effect like the sacramentals. It's not efficacious, like it works every single time. But burying you know, having a devotion, burying a St. Joseph statue goes along with asking St. Joseph for your intercession, you know, and putting your trust in his prayers in order to have a successful home sale event. And then maybe you want to dig it up and take it with you to the next place or something like that. I don't know. I don't know what the rules there are. Or if you're going to hang it in your rearview mirror, you know, look at it and actually recite the prayer. Or something like that. Or in the case of the blessed scapular, the brown scapular, and there are many types of scapulars we cover in the book. It's called the Sabbatine privilege, you know, that those who wear this will not succumb to the fires of hell. You know, that is something that the Blessed Virgin Mary did promise St. Simon Stock, but you can't skip over the other instructions that were given to him as well for people who are, people who get that consecrated. It's called a... oh, I'm losing the word. There's a ritual it's called an investiture. It's called an investiture ceremony, and it's actually kind of like a rite of the church that a Carmelite or any other priest can provide, and a person can kind of consecrate themselves to a specific lifestyle, like receiving the Eucharist on a weekly basis, going to confession on a weekly basis, reciting the Rosary, or in the place of the Rosary, the Divine Office every day. Now, of course, these items are going to lead you to a life of sanctification, a heavy sanctification, and ergo you would have the privilege of, you know, immediate entrance to heaven upon your death, should you remain in a state of grace. You might have time in purgatory, but the Blessed Virgin Mary promises upon people who devoutly practice these items will have that privilege. So it makes sense if you can, you know, kind of put the math together, but just putting it over your shoulders as a scapular and saying, hey, now I'm protected. You know, that doesn't make a lot of sense. So yeah, absolutely. Catholics are, certain Catholics are guilty of probably ignorantly, but with the right intention, going about these practices. But really what we want is, again, we want sacramentals to dispose us to that life of sanctity. It doesn't stop us from the need to go to daily mass, confession, and the whole 9 yards to actually live that sanctified life.
Right. Oh, wonderful. All right. So, final question: What do you think is the most interesting or the coolest sacramental?
Man, I'm a Dominican, so I'm leaning heavily to the Rosary. I'm a lay Dominican, so the history of that was really cool, and really writing the whole book was super neat. What did you mention in the beginning? You said I didn't know that the vestments were a sacramental. There were so many in this book that I was like, I didn't realize that was one, or I knew that it was one, and I didn't think like get to that chapter that I would have much to be able to write. But whenever I sunk myself into the research, man, it just poured out, and it made these chapters kind of write themselves. But I think the one that really surprised me the most are these little ones called these little sacramentals called the Agnus Dei, and listeners might have some familiarity with them, but I don't really know anybody that's ever heard of these, let alone have ever seen one. They're kind of rare. They're these little wax discs that come from actually the Sistine Chapel, and these go way back. These go way back to like the 2nd or 3rd century, along with the creation of holy medals. If you couldn't strike a holy medal with the face of Christ on it or a lamb or something, you would imprint a lamb on a piece of wax. Well, the church continued this. It's called an Agnus Dei, of course. That is what we use to, that's the Latin word for the Paschal Lamb. Agnus Dei, the Lamb of God, coming from the words of John the Baptist. These are little wax discs that the Pope actually consecrates. It's not even a blessing. or any sort of rite. It's a consecration where he double blesses them in these huge vats of holy water at the Vatican. He does these on years of Jubilee or at certain occasions, maybe like every 10 years or so he'll do it. And what they do these days is they melt down the Paschal candle from the Sistine Chapel, and they will hand these wax discs out. There's a finite amount, and they're pretty brittle, right? And he'll hand them out to certain dignitaries, probably bishops, cardinals, and you might receive one as a gift that way. But they're very rare. I think they're so cool. There's so much that I could say about it, but the chapter on that is just it's just really cool to see how just such a simple and rare sacramental is still being made today, still being used, still a valid sacramental, but goes way back to like the very beginning of Christian piety. That was the best one, the Agnus Dei.
That is actually really cool. I didn't know that about that. I mean, I'd heard of it before, but I didn't know anything of what you just said. So that actually is very cool. All right, Sean, thank you so much. Great crash course in Sacramental. So where can people find you online if they want to learn more?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, Sean McAfee on all of those. I've got a big family. I'm not the most active, but that's where I am. And if you're looking for the book, you can find it at your local Catholic bookstores. I ask you to go there first, support those small businesses. And then if you want to go online, Amazon, tanbooks.com or Barnes & Noble, really wherever books are sold, you'll see this.
Excellent. All right, let me hold it up again for our viewers so they can see it. Beautiful book. Like I said, I like it very much. My kids have liked looking at it. Sean, great interview. Thanks for being here today.
Thanks, Christine.
All right, 10 books. Like you said, that's where you can find the book. And, at the end of the day, we're so blessed as Catholics. Sacramentals are such a gift. Sacramentals are such a great grace, such a great gift from God. And this book is tremendous. Thank you so much for watching and listening, everybody. And in the words of St. Joan of Arc, in God's name, forward boldly.
Angel, you're wearing your sacramental. I know you like your sacramental, huh? That is miraculous pendant. Okay, that's for exorcism. Okay, don't lose it, okay? That's yours. Okay, you've been using that for a long time. Okay, Angel? Miraculous pendant by Brother Jaime Vicente.